The planet of Aridian had never been kind. Its red-brown desert stretched endlessly under two suns, the air thin and dry, and its winds carried sand that could strip paint from metal in a single gust. For most humans, it was barely livable, but for a handful who had chosen isolation, it was home. Among them was Jerk, a man who had once known cities full of laughter and lights, but now spent his days tending to a small homestead far from the nearest settlement. He had been a logistics engineer in the galactic fleet, a man trained to solve problems and organize chaos. Yet, after the death of his wife in a cargo transport accident 5 years ago, he had abandoned his life among humans and retreated to the frontier. Here, the only things that mattered were survival, work, and the quiet memories he carried. Jerk had grown used to solitude. His house was small but sturdy, built of reinforced steel and adaptive polymers to withstand Aridian's violent dust storms. A few solar arrays and wind turbines provided power, and a small hydroponic garden kept him fed. Life was simple, but the quiet often pressed heavily on him. He remembered his wife's laughter echoing in the hallways, her smile when the sun rose over the horizon. That memory was both a comfort and a pain, a reminder of everything he had lost. The Colony Council had recently introduced a program meant to address the loneliness that plagued many frontier settlers. A mail-order companionship system that connected humans with alien partners who wished to leave their homeworlds for new opportunities. Most of these arrangements were purely transactional, aliens sent to remote planets where they would be useful human settlers who needed companionship. Jerk had dismissed it at first, believing he needed no one. But now, with the storms growing harsher and the colony's population dwindling, he found himself thinking differently. Not about companionship in a romantic sense, he had long given up on that, but about connection, someone to share the silent nights with. The shuttle's landing was announced by a low hum that grew steadily until it vibrated against the walls of his homestead. He walked outside, shielding his eyes against the bright twin suns reflecting off the metal. The shuttle door opened, and a figure stepped out. She was alien, unlike anything Jerk had seen in person before. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, smooth and reflective in the sunlight. Her eyes were larger than a human's, deep and intelligent, observing him with caution. Her frame was fuller than the images he had seen in the registry, and a subtle nervousness clung to her movements, as if she expected rejection. "Are you Jerk?" she asked, her voice melodic, with tones that carried a slight accent from her homeworld. "Yes," he said, stepping forward. "Welcome to Aridian." He paused, unsure how much to say, then added, "I hope the trip wasn't too hard." She nodded. "The journey was long. I did not expect to be wanted." Her words were hesitant, almost fragile. Jerk noticed the slight tremble in her hands as she held a small pack. "Wanted?" he asked, frowning. "I don't understand." She shifted her weight, avoiding his gaze. "On my planet, they said I am not suitable, too large, not perfect. They sent me here. I thought I would face the same rejection." Her voice was tinged with sadness, the kind that clung to a person's bones. Jerk studied her for a long moment. He could see her fear, her hesitation, the pain of having been dismissed by her own people, and yet he also saw strength. A sharp mind, alert to her surroundings, her posture carrying resilience even in uncertainty. He did not see the labels she had been given. He only saw a being who had endured much and still stood. "You are welcome here," he said firmly. "I did not ask for anyone perfect. I only asked for someone willing to survive, work, and live alongside me. That is all I need." Her eyes widened slightly. You are not rejecting me." He shook his head. "Not at all. I don't care what your people think. Here we measure worth by action, not by shape or color." He held out a hand, simple but honest. "Come with me. You'll stay in the guest quarters. We will see how things go." She hesitated, studying him as if to confirm he was real, that his words were genuine. Finally she nodded, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since she had stepped off the shuttle. "Thank you, Jerk." Inside the homestead, he showed her to a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the barren desert. The simplicity of the place was stark compared to her homeworld, where cities floated above oceans and light reflected from crystal towers. Here, she would have to adapt. Yet, for the first time in years, Jerk felt a spark of hope. Perhaps the monotony of solitude would be broken, not by a perfect companion but by someone real. The days that followed were a test. Jerk had routines he had followed for years, tending hydroponics, repairing solar panels, and maintaining his equipment. At first she was quiet, watching him work, offering cautious help. But gradually she began to assist, her own knowledge proving invaluable. She understood environmental engineering and adapted quickly to the alien technology. Her body, which others had scorned, gave her endurance and strength beyond what he could do alone. When a sandstorm hit harder than expected, she helped secure the arrays and stabilize the water tanks, her steady presence making him realize how much he had underestimated the value of partnership. As they worked, they began to talk, not about romance but about life. She spoke of her home, of the rigid expectations that had left her feeling unworthy, of the loneliness she had carried for years. He shared memories of his wife, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons the frontier had taught him. Slowly, walls began to crumble. Trust grew where fear had once resided. They laughed at small mistakes, broken tools, miscalculated planting schedules, and the sound felt strange to Jerk, almost foreign in its warmth. It had been years since anyone had laughed with him, not just at him. The bond they began to form was subtle but powerful. It was not born of necessity alone, but of mutual respect and shared survival. He admired her resilience. She admired his patience and quiet determination. Neither expected instant friendship, much less anything deeper. Yet something was beginning to grow, like the first shoots in his hydroponic garden after months of neglect, a small, fragile hope. One evening, after a particularly grueling day fixing a collapsed water reservoir, they sat outside, looking at the twin suns dip below the horizon. The sky turned a muted palette of reds and purples, a reminder that beauty could exist even in harshness. She spoke softly. "I never thought I would find anyone who does not see me as a mistake." Jerk took a deep breath, feeling a pang in his chest he had not felt in years. "You are not a mistake. You are capable, intelligent, strong. Anyone who says otherwise does not understand value. Here, on this planet with everything we face, you are exactly who we need." She looked at him, and for a moment the fear in her eyes gave way to something else, relief, wonder, and the cautious beginnings of trust. I did not know someone could say that and mean it." "I do," he replied simply, "and I always will." That night, for the first time in years, Jerk slept without the crushing weight of loneliness pressing on him. And she, in the small room he had prepared, slept knowing that, for the first time, she was not rejected, not judged, but accepted. The desert winds howled outside, indifferent to their small human triumph, but inside the homestead, warmth lingered. Two broken lives had crossed paths, and though neither knew what the future held, both felt the quiet thrill of possibility. The days that followed were not easy. There were arguments over routines, misunderstandings about alien and human ways, and moments when the harshness of the planet reminded them why life on Iridian was brutal. Yet, every challenge overcame only strengthened the bond between them. When he saw her carrying water containers across the rocky terrain with ease, or when she repaired a malfunctioning solar panel in the middle of a storm, he could not help but feel admiration. And when she watched him struggle with calculations for irrigation systems, she offered guidance, her mind sharp and unyielding. The homestead began to thrive under their joint effort. Plants grew more robust, water storage improved, and the solar arrays ran efficiently. More than that, they began to feel a sense of family, a partnership that went beyond words. The alien woman had been rejected for not fitting into a mold created by distant customs. Here in the raw and merciless expanse of Aridian, her skills, courage, and intelligence were what mattered, and Jerk had recognized that from the start. Weeks passed, and their routines settled into a rhythm. Sometimes they would sit outside after a day of work, watching the sun set and talking about dreams for the future, however small. The alien woman, once cautious and fearful, began to smile more freely, to laugh, and to speak of things she had never dared to hope for. And Jerk, whose heart had been heavy with grief, began to feel the stirrings of a new life, one that included someone else not as a replacement, but as a companion, a partner, and perhaps one day, something more. Though the winds of Aridian continued to rage, they no longer felt alone. Two broken lives had met at the edge of the galaxy, and together they had begun to heal. The desert might test them, the universe might challenge them, but for the first time in years, both knew that humanity's quiet strength, the willingness to see value where others see flaws, the courage to trust again, was more powerful than any storm. And so, in the harsh light of twin suns and under skies that stretched endlessly, the widower and the alien woman began their shared journey. It was a journey not marked by perfection or expectation, but by resilience, understanding, and the quiet triumph of human spirit in the face of judgment and adversity. In that beginning, in that small homestead on a lonely frontier planet, a story of hope and partnership had taken root, ready to grow, one day at a time. The weeks on Aridian passed faster than either Jerk or his companion expected. The alien woman, who had begun to call herself Leora, proved her worth each day. Her movements were precise, her mind quick, and her instincts for survival uncanny. Jerk had worked alone for years and had become capable, but Leora's presence elevated their efforts. The hydroponic garden thrived under her adjustments, water conservation improved with her suggestions, and the solar arrays, once vulnerable to the relentless storms, now stood firmly reinforced. The homestead was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. Despite the progress, the planet was unforgiving. Dust storms rolled across the desert in massive waves, cutting visibility to near zero and rattling the house's walls with their intensity. One morning, after a particularly violent storm, Jerk emerged from the reinforced doorway to find that the primary water tank had cracked, leaking precious reserves onto the sand. The sight made his stomach tighten. Years of careful management threatened to vanish in hours. Leora appeared beside him without a word, her violet skin dusted with sand, her eyes scanning the damage quickly. "We can fix this," she said simply, "but we need to work fast, otherwise the water is lost." Jerk nodded. They moved in tandem, a silent understanding between them. Leora directed him to patch the main crack while she handled the pressure valves. Her knowledge of structural integrity, something he would not have expected from someone judged only by appearances, saved them from disaster. When the storm subsided, the water tank held steady and they both breathed a sigh of relief. "That was impressive," Jerk admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "I don't think I could have done it alone." Leora smiled faintly, but it was more than a smile. It was the first true warmth he had seen on her face. "I've survived worse," she said. "I've learned that every failure teaches you how to survive the next one." For Jerk, her words carried more than survival lessons. They were a reflection of human resilience as well, the quiet determination to continue even when everything seems against you. He realized then that the strength he admired in Leora was not about her body or her species. It was about her will, her mind, and her courage. Life continued in this rhythm of challenge and adaptation. Jerk and Leora began exploring the surrounding area, surveying the land for better soil, more stable water sources, and safer shelter from storms. Leora's knowledge of alien ecosystems surprised him. She understood how to detect water pockets underground by studying plant growth, how to predict storm patterns from the subtle shifts in wind, and how to preserve energy while working in extreme conditions. It became clear that her people's rejection of her was not only cruel but deeply misguided. One day, while surveying a canyon a few kilometers from the homestead, they stumbled upon a wrecked supply shuttle. It had crashed long ago and the remains were mostly buried under sand, but there were usable components scattered across the site. Jerk looked at Leora. "We could salvage this," he said. "Parts, tools, maybe even materials to improve the homestead." She nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. "Yes, let's see what we can recover." Over the next few days, they worked side by side, carefully dismantling broken panels, retrieving wires and tubing, and carrying heavy components back to their home. The work was exhausting, but Leora never complained, and Jerk found himself laughing at her occasional sarcastic remarks. He realized that the laughter, once absent from his life, was becoming common again. Yet, not everyone viewed their partnership positively. Messages arrived from the Interstellar Council questioning why a human had accepted a mate deemed unfit by her own species. Officials from her homeworld demanded explanations, suspicious that the arrangement violated cultural norms. Jerk read the messages aloud one evening, frustration tightening his jaw. "They don't understand," he said. "They see only what they want to see. They judge her for being something she is not instead of seeing her as she truly is." Leora stood silently, absorbing his words. "I have grown used to rejection," she admitted softly. "But here you see me, you accept me, that is new." Jerk placed a hand on her shoulder. "And it will stay that way. Out here we survive by what we can do, not by what anyone says we should be. Your value is proven every day in every action." Days later, the colony faced a true test. A severe dust storm swept across the region, stronger than any in living memory. Visibility dropped to almost zero, communication lines went down, and nearby homesteads reported damages. Jerk and Leora worked tirelessly to secure their home and protect the crops that sustained them. The storm raged for 3 days, leaving a thick layer of sand over everything, and when it finally cleared, they emerged to assess the damage. To their relief, most of their work had held. The reinforced solar arrays survived, the water tanks remained intact, and the hydroponic garden, though covered in dust, was recoverable. Jerk looked at Leora, admiration and gratitude mixing in his eyes. "We did it," he said quietly, "because we worked together." She smiled, brushing a streak of sand from her cheek. "Because we never gave up," she replied. The storm, harsh and unrelenting, had revealed more than their survival skills. It had shown them the strength of trust and partnership. Jerk realized that he had begun to rely on Leora, not just for work but for companionship. Her presence had become a steady force in his life, one that made the silence of the homestead bearable and the harsh desert almost welcoming. Weeks after the storm, the alien council sent representatives to Iridian. They arrived in sleek ships, curious and cautious. Their mission was to assess Leora's well-being and determine if her arrangement with a human violated any interstellar agreements. Jerk met them with calm defiance, while Leora observed quietly, her posture upright and confident despite her nervousness. One of the representatives spoke first, their tone formal. "It has come to our attention that you have accepted a mate deemed unsuitable by your species. Explain why this union exists." Jerk stood tall. "This union exists because we recognize each other's value, not based on narrow standards, but on skill, intelligence, and will. She has survived more than most, contributed to the survival of this homestead, and proven her worth daily. No law, no expectation, no judgment from afar can change that." There was silence as the representatives absorbed his words. Leora then stepped forward, her voice calm and unwavering. "I am here because I chose to be. Not because anyone ordered me, not because I was perfect, but because I wanted to survive, to contribute, and to trust. I have learned what humans know. Value is proven through action. The representatives exchanged glances, their skepticism softened by the undeniable evidence of Leora's capabilities. The homestead was intact, the crops were flourishing, and the human and alien had demonstrated a partnership that had strengthened both of them. Before leaving, the lead representative spoke. It appears that we underestimated the strength of such partnerships. Your union, while unconventional, has merit. We will report our findings and perhaps reconsider our policies. Once they departed, Jerk exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. Leora turned to him, a small, genuine smile on her lips. I did not expect anyone to defend me, she admitted. You are worth defending, he said simply, and I always will. Life settled into a new rhythm. The homestead became a beacon for other settlers, showing that survival depended on cooperation, not perfection. Word spread quietly that humans valued ability, courage, and loyalty above rigid standards. Other aliens who had been rejected on their homeworlds began requesting placements with human settlers, inspired by what they saw in Jerk and Leora. One evening, after another day of repairs and tending the garden, they sat outside, watching the sun set. Leora's hand brushed against Jerk's and he did not pull away. The simple touch spoke volumes: trust, companionship, and perhaps the first inklings of affection. Neither rushed the feeling. They allowed it to grow naturally, nourished by shared trials and mutual respect. Do you think humans are different?" Leora asked softly. "Different from what my people expected." Jerk smiled, the fading light reflecting in his eyes. "We survive by seeing potential where others see failure. We trust when others doubt. We value people for what they do, not for what they look like. That is our strength. That is why we endure." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unspoken emotion. "Then I am glad I came here, to you, to this place." And in the quiet desert, under twin suns that would rise again tomorrow, two lives, once broken, once lonely, found a rhythm together. They had faced storms, judgment, and the harshness of an uncaring world, yet they persisted. They had begun to prove that humanity's quiet strength, its courage, compassion, and resilience, could change the course of a life or even a planet. For Jerk and Leora, the journey was only beginning. Together they would face whatever Aridian or the universe threw at them. And in doing so, they would show that true worth is measured not by perfection, but by action, heart, and the choice to rise above rejection. The alien woman, once rejected for not fitting expectations, had found a place where she was valued. And the widower, once isolated and broken by loss, had discovered that companionship could still exist in its most honest human form. Their story, like the desert wind, moved quietly but persistently, shaping the world around them, leaving traces of resilience, hope, and the undeniable truth. Humans endure because they see the possible, even in what others discard. Months had passed since the dust storm that had tested their strength, and life on the homestead had found a fragile stability. Jerk and Leora worked together seamlessly, their partnership stronger than ever. The crops were thriving, the water systems were efficient, and the solar arrays had been upgraded with parts salvaged from the wrecked shuttle. More importantly, they had begun to understand each other in ways words could not fully capture. Trust had become the foundation of their bond, and mutual respect had grown into something neither expected but both quietly cherished. But peace was fragile. Reports arrived from neighboring colonies. A series of thefts and sabotage had begun along the frontier routes. Other settlers had lost supplies, some had been injured, and rumors spread of a mercenary group hired by corporate interests seeking control of Aridian's resources. The Interstellar Council sent urgent messages, advising frontier settlers to strengthen defenses and coordinate with nearby settlements. Jerk studied the messages, his brow furrowed. "They want to take what we have," he said quietly, his voice heavy with concern. If they succeed, the homesteads here could collapse. Leora placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. Then we will stop them, together. Her words were calm, but there was fire in her eyes. Jerk had seen her face in danger before, but this determination was something new. She had become not just a companion, but a partner in the truest sense, someone whose courage matched his own. Over the next days, they worked tirelessly to reinforce the homestead. Barriers were strengthened, early warning sensors repaired, and traps set along likely approach routes. Leora's knowledge of alien technology gave them an edge. She modified sensors to detect heat signatures and vibrations, creating a system far more advanced than the simple alarms Jerk had used alone. For the first time, the homestead became more than a place to survive. It became a fortress. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, a scout ship appeared on the horizon, moving too fast and erratically to be friendly. Jerk and Leora immediately recognized the threat. It was one of the mercenary teams. They had come for supplies and possibly to take control of the homestead. Jerk glanced at Leora. "We need to act fast. Do you think the council will intervene in time?" Leora shook her head. "No, they rely on distance and reports. Here, it is up to us." Together, they enacted the plan they had prepared. Jerk guided the defenses, using traps and barricades to funnel the attackers toward areas where Leora could use her strength and agility. She moved with precision, disabling drones, redirecting energy flows, and outmaneuvering the mercenaries at every turn. Her alien physiology, once derided by her own people, gave her stamina and reflexes that humans alone could not match. Jerk marveled at her abilities, realizing that every judgment made against her had been based on ignorance, not truth. The battle stretched through the night. Sandstorms, whether natural or stirred by their own defenses, added chaos to the fight. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the two of them moved as a single unit, anticipating each other's moves without needing to speak. Hours passed, and the mercenaries began to falter, unable to overcome the combination of human ingenuity and Leora's extraordinary skills. By dawn, the attackers were defeated or retreating. The homestead stood, battered but unbroken. Jerk leaned against the reinforced wall, breathing heavily, while Leora surveyed the area, checking that no lingering threats remained. They had done it together. "You were incredible," Jerk said, his voice filled with awe. "I could not have done this without you." Leora shook her head, smiling faintly. "We did this together. We protect what we have because we value it. That is what makes us strong." The events of that night did not go unnoticed. Reports of the battle, and of the unusual strength and cooperation between the human and the alien woman, spread across the frontier colonies. Settlers began to reconsider the rigid standards imposed by their own species. If someone labeled unworthy could defend a homestead against trained mercenaries, perhaps their definitions of value were too narrow. The Interstellar Council sent envoys to inspect the homestead once more. They came cautiously, expecting to find trouble or incompetence. Instead, they found a thriving settlement, meticulously organized, with crops growing, water secure, and solar systems running perfectly. They observed Jerk and Leora coordinating flawlessly, their teamwork undeniable. One of the envoys spoke, her tone formal but tinged with curiosity. "We expected complications. We did not anticipate this level of efficiency and coordination. Explain the arrangement between you two." Jerk looked at Leora, then back at the envoys. "Our arrangement is simple. We respect each other's abilities, trust each other's judgment, and work together to survive. Nothing more, nothing less. We have proven that value is not measured by appearance but by action." Leora added, her voice steady and confident, "I was rejected by my people because I did not fit their expectations. Here, I am judged by what I do and by the contribution I make. That is what matters, and it is enough." The envoys exchanged looks. It was clear that the evidence before them could not be ignored. Recommendations were sent back to the council. Policies regarding mail-order partnerships would be revised, and greater respect for individual skill and action would be recognized. Leora's rejection by her own species had become a catalyst for change, proving that human judgment, rooted in fairness, practicality, and the recognition of true ability, was more effective than rigid rules. After the council left, life on the homestead settled into a calmer rhythm. The threat of mercenaries had faded, and the recognition of their accomplishments brought a quiet satisfaction. Yet, Jerk and Leora's bond had changed. It was no longer just survival or partnership. It had grown into something deeper. One evening, as the sun set in their familiar twin colors, Leora looked at Jerk. "Do you think we could survive this life without each other?" Jerk smiled, his gaze steady on hers. "I do not want to find out. You are more than a partner. You are someone I trust, someone I respect, someone I choose to have by my side every day." She felt a warmth that she had not known before. For years, she had been judged, rejected, and dismissed. Here, in the harshness of Aridian, she was valued for her actions, her intelligence, and her heart. And the man before her, once broken by loss, had learned to open his life to another, not out of need, but out of respect and understanding. As night fell, they walked to the edge of the homestead, looking out over the desert plains. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and metal, and the stars emerged above, brilliant against the dark sky. The twin moons cast silver light across the landscape, and for the first time in years, Leora felt a sense of belonging. "I never imagined a place like this," she whispered. "Nor did I," Jerk replied. "But it is ours, and together we can face whatever comes next." The future was uncertain. Aridian was harsh, and the universe beyond was unpredictable. Yet in their partnership they had found a strength neither had expected. They had faced storms, attacks, and prejudice, and emerged stronger. They had proven that humanity's quiet strength, its courage, compassion, and ability to see value where others only saw flaws, was a force to be reckoned with. In the following months, the homestead became a model for other frontier settlers. Visitors came to learn how humans and aliens could work together, how respect and trust could surpass rigid expectations, and how survival depended on cooperation rather than judgment. Stories of the widower and the alien woman who had been rejected for being too different spread quietly, inspiring others to reconsider their own prejudices. Jerk and Leora continued their work, side by side, as equals. They celebrated small victories, a bountiful harvest, a repaired water system, a clear day after weeks of storms. They learned each other's rhythms, shared meals, and exchanged stories of the past, of homes left behind, of challenges overcome. And slowly, without rush or pressure, a bond deeper than friendship began to form. One evening, as they prepared dinner in the small kitchen, Leora paused and looked at Jerk. "I was wrong to expect rejection," she said softly. "Here I am valued. Here I belong." Jerk reached across the table, taking her hand. "You were never unworthy. You were simply misunderstood. And now we face life together as partners in every way that matters." She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reflected relief, hope, and the first inklings of love. "Then let us continue," she said. "Together." And so, under the twin moons of Aridian, in a homestead built by determination and care, the widower and the alien woman began the next chapter of their lives. They had faced loss, rejection, storms, and threats, and had emerged stronger for it. They had proven that value is measured not by perfection, but by courage, skill, and heart. In the quiet desert, with stars above and the wind carrying the scent of resilience, Jerk and Leora stood together, partners, friends, and perhaps more, ready to face the challenges of the frontier. Humanity, in its quiet but persistent way, had shown that the strength to endure, to trust, and to see worth where others see only flaws could change lives, and perhaps even worlds. And for the first time in both their lives, they were not just surviving. They were thriving,